Hello, everyone. I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, not even ankle monitors could prevent two teenagers from, according to police, being involved in a murder this week. Once again, the system of juvenile justice is under fire. A couple of grown-up politicians were in trouble this week, too. A parish president indicted for felony stalking of his ex-wife, and a judge's actions being reviewed for possible election law violation. We'll review these stories ourselves, as well as the status of police body cameras, the latest in politics, and our Future Watch segment looks at new developments in street lighting. And shedding light for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Travers, Mackel, WDSU-TV, Channel 6. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Mike Perlstein, reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4. And first over to Mike, and a very, very disturbing story where police allege that a couple of juveniles who were wearing electronic monitoring devices were involved in some serious crimes, so they say.
Yeah, all allegations at this point, but what we know so far actually went from bad to worse today. The two 16-year-olds had a hearing in juvenile court. It was revealed from the lead homicide detective that the victim was shot 10 times.
And this is a pizza delivery man.
Delivery man, right around midnight, Monday. They really put the pieces of this crime together rather quickly. By 9 a.m. the next morning, they determined that a juvenile on electronic ankle monitoring, an ankle bracelet, was in the area of the crime at the precise time that the crime happened, outside of his restricted area. With that, they got an arrest warrant for that juvenile. Upon serving the warrant, he was with another juvenile, also with an ankle bracelet. They ran, arrested both of them, and the second suspect was brought in for questioning and allegedly, according to the detective, gave a partial confession. So the hearing today was a probable cause hearing. The judge did find probable cause. The next step for the two 16-year-olds is that the DA's office is moving to take them to adult court, where if indicted and convicted of murder, whether it be first degree or second degree, that's still in doubt, they would serve mandatory life sentence without parole.
What were they wearing ankle bracelets for already?
Okay, that's not determined, but it was some juvenile criminal allegations. We should be able to get that, and especially if they're moved to adult court, files become matter of public record. But it was relatively serious enough to not only have them out on a bond, but also on an ankle monitor. Now I know that there are many questions raised about why weren't deputies at the sheriff's office who monitor this able to catch up to them as soon as they violated, as soon as they left their restricted area. The system does not quite work like that. There are hundreds of people on these ankle monitors at any one time. Just leaving the restricted area, which happens more often than we would like to think, it does raise a flag. In this particular case, this one juvenile, this is probably the most troubling aspect of this. He had violated this once before and is now linked to a carjacking.
This weekend
just the
also,
night before.
just about 24 hours before.
Yeah. But even that, before that link was made, that violation wasn't enough to get him locked up. He was released right back on the ankle bracelet and then popped up at the precise time and place of this murder. Now, since then, they've put all these pieces together. The one thing that we did learn was something that, frankly, I don't think anyone publicly was familiar with. The ankle bracelets obviously have some kind of GPS tracking to pinpoint, not that just that they violated their restricted zone, but if necessary, and it took some time actually, to come up with this, pinpoint exactly where they went when they violated.
Right. Well, apparently, like you said, it has a GPS device, and that's how they're determining that these kids were in the location of this crime. Now, are you saying the carjacking, when that was determined and he was wearing the electronic device, they picked him up then?
Well, no, he wasn't yet linked to that.
Okay.
But all they knew was that he had left his area, and they went out and checked on him.
They did check on him.
And he returned to his area. And, that's a form of, being held on bond and violating the conditions of your bond, which is grounds for a judge to revoke and have that defendant locked up. Did not in this case. He was released, within 24 hours, obviously, to allegedly leave this area again and commit a horrible crime.
Mike, what do we know about a situation when a juvenile is tried as an adult? Do jurors react differently to that? Do they think, well, I think this guy's guilty, but if we find him guilty, he's only 16 years old, he's going to be there a long time, he's going to be in Angola. I mean, do they react differently to that kind of situation?
The only way that I've seen jurors react based on age, and it can be juvenile or someone who's relatively, has a relatively clean criminal record, would be when it comes to the death penalty. And in this particular case, because they're 16, they would not be eligible for the death penalty due to a 2005 U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Juveniles cannot face death. So I do think that in this instance, these were, juveniles who had some kind of juvenile rap sheet by virtue of them being on these ankle bracelets at the time they're committing crimes. One of them at least is alleged to have been involved in this carjacking. I think with that kind of evidence, that juries will be just as hard on them in finding the facts of the case. Now, in a death penalty case, they actually decide life and death, and it really becomes a whole different type of hearing. But in this case, just on the facts, if the facts are there, of course, in Louisiana, second-degree murder is mandatory life without parole. There's no range of sentencing. It's locked up, throw away the key.
Well, the decision hasn't been made yet to try them as adults.
No, that decision comes from the juvenile court judge, but that is almost always granted when the seriousness of the crime is murder. In this case, it's the ultimate crime that qualifies for that. I would say we're going to see them in adult court in pretty short order.
And, with the death penalty, in Orleans Parish, jurors don't give out the death penalty. I think it's once in the last decade, and that was Mackel Anderson, and that conviction was tossed out by former Judge Linda Van Davis. So, you don't even see juries hand out the death penalty traditionally in Orleans Parish.
And the prosecutors in Orleans realize that.
Right,
they
absolutely.
Rarely go for
They
it.
rarely go for it, because second degree is life at Angola without probation or parole, so it's, in essence, the same thing.
But the fact that it's one thing to shoot somebody impulsively. The fact that they shot him 10 times, as you say, first of all, is that a form of madness, and is that something that jurors will respond to?
Oh, I think the jurors, would respond, like anyone would respond to the facts of that crime. Just horrific circumstances. And one thing I will say, having gone to that court hearing today, I've been to a couple of juvenile court hearings on some very, very serious felonies, and it is shocking that how old and hardened 16-year-olds can look. They've obviously been through the system. They were very sort of cold and emotionless, despite just horrific facts being presented by the detective.
And we're going to have to wrap up this discussion, but you were in the juvenile hearing today,
Correct,
which is unusual in and of itself, right?
For crimes of violence,
Yes.
The public can now
attend.
sit in on juvenile court
Okay,
hearings.
all righty, thanks. Okay, now over to Travis for something that, was big news also this week. Two judge candidates got together, and we got to hear what their conversation was.
Right, it was interesting. Marie Williams, a candidate for judge, had a lunch meeting that was set up by a political broker, if you will, a woman named Sonia Diaz, who's worked on numerous campaigns, and she met with Judge Frank Murillo, and she recorded the conversation, and in that conversation, it appears, by listening to the audio tapes, that the judge tells her that he will support her for a $75,000 a year part-time position at the courthouse. It's a magistrate commissioner position, possibly in exchange for her dropping out of the race. He told her, I want you out of the race. So, and based on the conversation that Marie Williams had recorded with this political broker, it was pretty clear that the Murillo camp, at least based on the conversations that we obtained, wanted her out of the race. And this is something, somebody that we all use in the media, Dane Cialino, I think had a pretty good quote. He said, this is something that happens every day in Louisiana politics. Unfortunately, this one was caught on audio tape. It's kind of like, I use the analogy a lot, everybody speeds on the interstate, but the person who gets a ticket goes, oh, come on, everybody does this. Well, you just got caught. And I think that there's a lot of similarities here, because I do understand that this is Louisiana politics and there's an underbelly, but this time it was captured on audio tape.
And of course, the judge is saying, no, I'm not offering her anything. I did
Right.
not do this. Now,
Right.
you were there. Were you there while the conversation was taking place? You were outside listening?
Yeah, I was outside the restaurant.
And could you listen? Could you hear it? I mean, who mic'd her? Because she was on a mic.
She was wearing a microphone, yes. She recorded the conversation, and we were waiting outside because...
Well, could you hear the conversation going on?
I think that the powers that be don't want me to get into the whole, news gathering component of it at WDSU, but we were there outside.
And you were able to talk to the mayor. I'm not to the mayor, to the judge.
We would talk to him. Well, it was clear based on the earlier conversation with Sonia Dide that Marie Williams believed she was going there for someone to offer her, in her words, something to get out of the race. So we asked the judge numerous questions when he walked out.
So is this going to lead to any sort of investigation? I mean, what kind of problems could this pose for the judge?
Probably more ethical than criminal, but I think it opens up the door to a bigger argument. I mean, the Metropolitan Crime Commission said they think that the State Judiciary Commission, the State AG, and the FBI should investigate. I know that parties involved have already been contacted by the FBI, even if it's just on an inquiring basis about, hey, what happened here, because it did catch people's attention what was said on the tape. Because Louisiana law is pretty clear, and there are a lot of revised statutes dealing with this. You can't offer anybody something of value to drop out of the race. So the argument is Frank Murillo's vote, 1 out of 13, mind you, to become a magistrate commissioner, is that enough to be considered something of value to get somebody out of the race? Because he was clear on the tape with her, too. To be fair, he said, hey, look, I'm only one of 13 judges. I'm one vote. I can try to get you, I think the exact quote was, I can try to get 6 more votes, but I'm only one vote right now. So it's our understanding that some people are looking into this, including the state Supreme Court and their investigatory arm of the Supreme Court.
And that is how the commissioners are selected. The judges appoint the commissioners, right?
Right.
And there is a
simple majority vote. That's it.
Yeah, simple majority. And there's a school of thought out there that we shouldn't even have commissioners. It would save the court some money. But that's for another discussion.
It is, and they do a big business too, though. I mean, you probably do need somebody there overnight and on weekends. I know a lot of other courts have a duty judge, they would call it. So I know the commissioners pretty much serve as the duty judge every night of the week and on weekends.
There's one other candidate in that race.
There is Graham Bosworth. He actually picked up.
Enjoying watching all this.
I don't know him. I met him Tuesday night at the Alliance for Good Government meeting. He did pick up the Alliance for Good Government endorsement. I don't know if it had anything to do with what we had reported the night before, but he chose not to comment, and that was probably by the advice and design of his political team to just stay out of this incident.
Well, it's definitely put more focus on this judgeship race, that's for sure, which has been sort of quiet so far, because we only have 3 sections right now up for election. Okay, thanks a lot.
I believe it's happening at Mandina's, is that correct?
At Mandina's.
Mandina's right now, you can find political conversations going on. There's always politicians talking politics at Mandina's. So that's become a hangout, yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Travis. All right, we're really running over right now with everything, but we're going to talk about street lighting right now in St. Charles.
Short, sweet, and to the point. Started July 1st. This is part of a $16.4 million improvement project to the street lights. Most of that money, is $14.7 million, is coming from a grant from the Entergy company to convert city street lights into LED lights, which provide a whiter, brighter light and a light that lasts longer. And this is all part, the city has right now about 4,100 lights that are out. That's actually a small percentage of the streetlights the city owns. The major part of this campaign right now is hitting where people really can see it most. St. Charles Avenue this week. It started on Monday. They have 5 crews working, replacing 600 lights a day. Citywide, they're working 15 crews, and their priority areas have been places where the NOLA for Life campaign was very strong to make sure they're reducing crime in areas of the city that were dark. Now it's hotspots like St. Charles and the interstate. I-10, I-510, I-610, New Orleans East had been very, very dark. Along St. Charles Avenue, there's a discernible difference now. It's a much whiter light. It's much brighter. I talked to several different restaurants up and down the avenue last night and said, have you noticed? And one woman said, I haven't been here all week. Let me step outside and I'll get back on the phone with you. She said, wow, it's white. And my husband said to me, what are you talking about this week? oh, you need to tell them about our block. And literally, we looked outside, and they had done our block in the warehouse district yesterday. So it's a noticeable change. They're supposed to last longer. The larger part of the problem with all these light outages around the city is there's no source of permanent funding. It had been an Entergy role way back when Entergy and the city got in dispute. Now Entergy and the mayor's office have to come up with a plan. Who's going to pay for and how and when will there be a permanent source so that we don't end up in a situation like the city was allegedly in when Mayor Landrieu took office, where more than 29% of the city's lights were dark.
So do you like the new whiter, brighter lights?
It, as Errol said, actually, it casts a brighter light down to the street, but it doesn't light as much above. So it feels like it's brighter on the street, but the whole area doesn't feel as bright. It's more comfortable driving, for sure. You can see more. I think Errol said the same thing. You definitely can see more on the street.
It reminds people that it's dark at night, okay? But I mean, if you're seeing, above eye level, and so it's, which is probably nice, it's the way it's supposed to be. But yeah, it does make a difference at street level, though.
Well, it is some progress. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks a lot, Don. Politics. We're in the political season, Errol.
Okay, well, this just in from the Channel 12 news analysis desk that Leon Cannizzaro has been projected the winner of the DA's race based on his strength in the polls and the fact that his one opponent was disqualified by the state Supreme Court because he wasn't current on. They agreed that he wasn't current on filing his state income tax. So Cannizzaro was elected. There was a lot of contesting that went back forward, and some allies of Cannizzaro had filed a suit. But when you see something like that, it's more than just losing your opponent. I think it's a little bit of a sign of satisfaction with Cannizzaro. He seems to have a fairly good reputation. Ed Cervenak's poll, as reported in The Advocate, was showing that he had like a 55% lead. So he would have won the election anyway. He's just spared the annoyance of having to go through all that. So he goes into his term and maybe has more time to concentrate on crime and all that.
I can tell you that there was a major celebration in the Cannizzaro camp with the Supreme Court disqualification of his opponent, Lon Burns. And I was sort of wondering why such a big celebration. It looked like they were going to win pretty easily, but just the hassle of running and raising money and being diverted from your job to campaign was a big deal there.
And there's always something that fluky that can happen in the campaign, and so just to get that removed and to be able to concentrate. On the other hand, it's kind of good to have an easy opponent. If on election night, if you win like with 80% of the votes, you can say, "Well, look at me, look how powerful I am." But I think the first choice is just to take the vacation and not have the opponent.
And not have an opponent.
Yeah.
Right.
Over in the Senate race, the person you hear the least about, the third candidate, at least right now, Rob Maness, who's the military guy. He's a Republican, and there are some people in Republican ranks who are being critical of his campaign, saying that it's diverting votes and is ultimately helping Mayor Landrieu. He denies that, of course. But tomorrow he's having Sarah Palin in. They're going to at a restaurant in Crown Point. So they're really trying to put together the Tea Party vote, which he probably had anyway. So those would be the two new developments in the campaign trail.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Our analysis desk, the political analysis desk. Okay, over to Travers again. St. Bernard President Dave Peralta has had his share of problems too.
You know what's some issues right now? He's indicted for the second time in 6 months. You know what's wild is that it really has nothing to do with what his day job, if you will, is as parish president. This all stems from, if you will, a personal issue that has gotten, his ex-wife would probably say this is justice being served. He would probably say this has gotten out of control because he has stood by hey, look, this was a personal family matter and things that we may have been doing were all above board. Obviously, a grand jury and state prosecutors didn't feel that way. He was indicted in April for sexual battery, which is a felony offense, did not resign. Then we all remember in July, his office and home were raided because he was allegedly cyber stalking or sending inappropriate emails, and that turned out to be true. He was indicted this past week for stalking charges and surrendered on Friday, went through the quick booking process in St. Tammany because that's where his now ex-wife lives. We have no indication that he's going to step down. We talked with council members this week when he was indicted, and they told us there is no mechanism in St. Bernard Parish legally that they can take to remove him. The only thing that could remove him would be a recall, in their opinion, or a resignation by him. They believe that he may have been looking at possibly taking some kind of extended leave, but they couldn't find much that would grant him anything outside of medical to take 6 months off and say, you know, I'm going to step back and still collect my paycheck. I think voters would probably have a pretty big problem with that.
I think you'd see a recall.
Right, you would
at
see
that
a recall
point.
petition then.
Is there any talk of a recall petition? What
Not
about the
yet, but I would
residents of St.
imagine.
Bernard?
I mean, I would imagine something would pop up, wouldn't you? I mean, I would think that in light of this, somebody's going to get one. But they're hard. You need 2/3 of voters in a quick time, and I mean, if anything's going to do it, this is probably going to do it. But it's hard to get a
The
recall.
case will move faster in court
Then
than
the
a
recall,
recall.
absolutely, right.
So what kind of comments are you hearing in St. Bernard Parish among residents there?
I think a lot of people are unhappy. I think anytime you're parish president, you know, everybody has due process and you want to see the legal system play out. He has maintained that he has done nothing wrong and he'll have his day in court. And this could go to trial is what people don't realize. I mean, the sexual battery and the stalking could go to trial. But he, like everybody else, he's innocent until proven guilty. But I think a lot of people are fed up. I mean, you got to remember, St. Bernard Parish isn't a place that re-elects a lot of people. I want to say every parish president for the last 20 years has been a one-term parish president, from Craig Tefera to Junior Rodriguez and on and on. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of growing disdain right now for Dave Peralta, whether it's right or wrong, given the charges.
And have we ever seen more intimate details about somebody's private
We wanna
life?
know.
It's very
revealed?
embarrassing, right? It's very embarrassing, and that's, I mean, this doesn't deal, you know, for all of the Aaron Broussards, the Jiff Hingles, Bill Hubbards, all the people that if people had their hand in the cookie jar. Here's a guy that wasn't accused of any wrongdoing running government, but
His
personal
wrongdoings at
issues
home.
happened at his house here, right?
So has any trial date been set for the first indictment?
You know, I
The
don't think
sexual
so.
assault charge?
I think no, I don't think so.
And then, as you pointed out, this one, the most recent one, came in St. Tammany.
It did because she lives there, and because I guess the stalking, and I believe it was cyber stalking and online stalking, happened at her residence in Slidell.
A little bit of an irony. A lot of people that used to live in St. Bernard Parish before Katrina moved to St. Tammany.
Right,
So
St.
it's
Tammany.
it's like a traveling road show, like a taste of home here.
Right, but it's, I mean, who would have thought that you know, you'd see a parish president indicted twice in 6 months and still in office? He was at work on Thursday of this week, operating like it's business as usual, which I guess what else are you going to do if you don't resign? But the council president down there was pretty clear that there is no mechanism for us to remove him
And I'm
legally.
sure he's well aware
even
of
if
that.
they wanted to, even if he had a unanimous council vote, we cannot remove him. Only a recall or a resignation can do that.
Okay, thanks a lot, Travers. And now we're going to move over to Mike again regarding police cameras, the cameras in police cars and then also body cameras. The monitor for the police consent decree complained that these aren't really being used enough.
Well, yeah, they were able to, actually crunch the numbers and see what percentage of officers are using their dash cams, as well as body cameras, which is outside of the scope of the consent decree, but something that the police department voluntarily entered into. And the numbers are low. And it was revealed at a pretty rare open court hearing on the consent decree to really air out, just where things stood on this particular measure. And it turns out that of the dash cams, only 68% of the times that they're supposed to be used are they actually being used. And that is not up to the federal standards, which should be close to 100%. However, once we got into the details of that at the consent decree hearing, it turns out that a large percentage of the cameras that aren't working are because of technical glitches, outdated servers, cameras that aren't working. And then another chunk was simply due to officers not being aware of the policies and procedures. There was, however, a double-digit percentage of officers who simply weren't using it when they were supposed to. What I found quite interesting was that the police department is holding those officers accountable. There are now 24 public integrity cases against officers not using their cameras when they were supposed to.
So they're just not turning them on? Is that them? Do they have to manually turn them on, or is it running all the time, like the camera in the police car? Are those running on? You have to turn them on.
What happens with the cameras in the car, they're supposed to be rigged so that they automatically turn on whenever lights and siren are used. In instances when the lights and siren are not used, the officer is supposed to flip it on in particular instances. And then once again, there's a whole policy that officers either didn't read the memo, hasn't been properly given out to the officers. But the police brass did promised to make some reforms to increase that accountability. Number one, as part of the trip sheets, these activity logs that officers fill out on every call that they make, there's now a checkbox for camera use. And so that if it's an instance where they have to use a camera, they have to know whether the camera was used or not. Furthermore, it's now going to be part of training of new recruits. Again, the officers who are having to adopt to this technology, they were never trained at the academy on the use of these cameras, and now suddenly they have to use it. So that's going to be part of training. Officers will now automatically, just reflexively, turn those cameras on, especially the body cameras, which was an even lower percentage. And the big controversy erupted when there was a shooting by a policewoman of a suspect, suffered a graze wound to the head.
That was not reported to the public or the media for
several days. Now that's, if there's an instance where you want the body camera on to really, that was the suspect giving one version, the officer giving a completely different version. Hey, let's just go to the camera. Well, guess what? No camera. It was never turned on. That's one of the 24 cases, in front of PIB on a violation of not using the camera.
It really hurt Chief Surpass too. He got kind of caught in the middle of all that.
And with that incident,
Absolutely.
as one police union representative said, it needs to be part of the muscle memory of the police force for them just to really get used to using it all the time, because it could help both the public and the officer too.
You would
also
think
work to
the
the
officers
disadvantage.
would
want
want to
them
turn
on,
it on,
right.
given the fact that it's been kind of open season on police corruption.
Right.
You would think that if they would want to turn it on and say, hey, look at the video, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And that's what Interim Police Chief Michael Harrison was saying, that officers should want
Right.
this to help clear them
Right.
against bogus allegations.
Okay, we have a talkative group here now. Real briefly, looking ahead.
On the November 4th ballot, there's going to be two home rule charter amendments and several constitutional amendments. One of the constitutional amendments would double the number of allowable millage for police and fire protection. So that's something the you crime guys should keep an eye on.
Right, Travers.
We're looking into some stories with elections coming up. Obviously, they make for good stories for all of us here in TV land and the media. So with the elections coming up, we'll have a lot of stories probably dealing with digging through documents and files for candidates.
Okay, next. Dawn.
Health officials are warning the flu is going to hit Louisiana much earlier this year than it did last year, and harder. So if you haven't gotten a flu shot, they're saying, go, do it soon.
Think about doing it. Okay, Mike.
Hey, just flipping to another parish in Plaquemines, after more than 10 years after their historic old courthouse burned down, they're finally about to break ground on a new courthouse. Very expensive proposition. However, in those 10 years, the population of that East Bank, in Pointe-a-la-Hache especially, has plummeted. Levee protection is not up to standard. So now there's questions raised anew on the wisdom of putting that courthouse back down in the East Bank.
All right. Thanks, you guys, for being here. Thank you all for watching us, and we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.